All right, folks, we're live. My name is Rafat Ali. I'm the CEO and founder of Skift. We're really excited to be here today. I think this is our third one in Skift Research's LinkedIn Live series. This is certainly has been the most popular one so far, and I have zero surprise why that's the case. We are going to talk for the next 30 to 35 minutes, maybe a little more, on generative AI and the opportunities and challenges in the travel industry. It's a topic that Skift has been covering deeply. Skift Research, all parts of our business, have been covering very deeply for the last at least 6 months since Chat GPT launched in, I think, end of November 2022 is when it happened. Thank you, folks. I see a lot of comments coming in, people joining in on LinkedIn and other places from all around the world. I saw a Reykjavik in the house, where we will be in about 3 weeks for our retreat. Boise, Idaho, Netherlands, Toronto, Taiwan, late night here. Thank you for watching. Puerto Rico, Leah, great to see you. And all the folks joining from everywhere. About 2,000 of you registered. I don't know how many will show up live, but I'm sure many of you will watch it on demand as well. It's going, I think, live on YouTube as well. And we will have, obviously, the recording there. We will post this on skift.com through our daily newsletter on the site as well, so you'll hear that. Let me introduce my fellow panelists here. Seth Borko, who is the Director of Research at Skift, has been sort of my intellectual sparring partner on many different things over the years, and also just came out with what I would say is probably the first ever research report, quantitative research report on AI in travel. Just came out 2 weeks ago, maybe less than that at this point. And if you haven't seen it, go to research.skift.com and you will see, I think that's the last, we just came out with that. And he will present some of the stuff on it in the coming few minutes as well. Welcome, Seth.
Thanks, glad to be here.
And Justin Dawes, who's our global travel tech reporter, and he really takes the word global seriously because he's in Barcelona and intends to travel quite a bit as part of his beat. He has been covering the rise of all the topics and companies, and what large companies as well as the startups are doing in the AI space in travel. Has written extensively in the last few months, so comes armed with examples, and we will talk a bunch about that. So before we get into a more structured part of this conversation, one, I should remind, we will take questions in the comments that you're seeing, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube. Put in your questions here, and our team will try and bubble them up as we go to the other part of the presentation, other part of this live thing, and we'll try and answer, at least think about answering coming up with the right questions, because a big part of where we are today is very few concrete answers are there. At least we're still very much in the questions phase of what will happen with AI in travel. And so the reason we've been very excited is, and I've been writing about how the travel search box, which came in 1995, 97, whenever the first online travel sites launched, that search box has pretty much remained the same for the last 20, 25 years. And I've even used the term the tyranny of the search box. We have to know how to search to get the right answers and the right types of answers for whatever we're booking. There's lots of numbers out there on travelers or prospective travelers looking at dozens of sites before they book. So clearly the travel planning process has been broken for a while. We used to sort of laugh at that until AI came along, this was just how things were. How do you expect it to change? There's not one company that was going to solve it, but turns out with generative AI and the large language models that underpin that and the intelligence that comes out of this, there's a lot of opportunities, not just on the front end of travel, but also on the back end of travel, all other parts. We have obviously been covering Chat GPT and its early attempts at things like trip planning or itinerary generation. And then when they launched the plugins, which is the equivalent of apps through Expedia and Kayak, or at least the two that were officially launched, on some early booking behavior, and to call it booking will be a stretch, but booking behavior coming into ChatGPT. Expedia itself has integrated a little bit. Expedia has been ahead compared to some of the other companies. Obviously, every company today in travel and tech is focused on it. So we are excited because it's an opportunity to rethink the UI and UX, at least from a front end perspective of travel, and then travel on the other end, which is the back end, the distribution, the inventory, the supply is such a complex and fragmented world. And AI and the variations of it that are going to come in the weeks, and literally it's weeks, but these days the leaps are happening in weeks. Auto GPT, which is a term that didn't exist, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, is a term that I'm still learning on basically different GPTs being stitched together to finish tasks versus just giving just Q&A. So for us, and we also launched a weekly newsletter that Justin is in charge of on AI and travel. This is collecting of our stories that we're doing on a weekly basis on AI. So a lot is happening. We are ourselves very excited as a media company covering the business of travel. We're beginning to use AI tools in our own company, whether it's image generation, summary. We're launching I can't say what, but we're launching something very soon in an AI service, if you will, in the next few weeks, and will be very exciting for us as well. So, with that preamble, I'm going to hand it to Seth. Seth, we have 4 big topics that we're going to walk through, and I'll let you take away from here.
Thanks, Rafat. It's really exciting to be here. It's great to see everyone coming in from all over the world. And like you're saying, we just launched this report on generative AI. So it was a research report that we did, myself and my research team, that we worked on. And we do think it's one of the first, if not the first, report to really try and put numbers around and say, what is the market opportunity? What is the size of AI in the travel industry specifically, right? There's a lot of research about AI as a generalist tool, but not necessarily travel industry specific. We came up with a number just shy of $30 billion today, but there's certainly potential for it to grow. And we're going to talk a bit more about that today. So there's 4 big things that we want to talk about. One, we just want to talk about, just introduce it, just how the pace of innovation is changing and picking up in the travel industry. Second, we're going to talk about the use cases that we see for AI in travel. Third, kind of why it's not a panacea, though. Sort of what are the new challenges and difficulties that we could face with AI. And then 4, end with this big picture, kind of dreaming big and say, okay, what in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, how does the industry look different with the potential of AI tools? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I hope, my co-panelists will jump in, ask me some questions, give their thoughts, and we'll also do our best to answer your questions throughout the conversation. So I want to start with this pace of innovation and how things are accelerating. I think this is just a fun, long-term, big picture slide, right? Where, there was a time when it would take us, this is how long until 50% of American households had this given technology, right? So it took households 40 years before we had 50% of households with electricity. Computers took 20 years. Internet took maybe a little over a decade. Smartphones took about 6 years or less. And so we're constantly up in the game as technology becomes more part of our lives, becomes lighter, and as the pace of innovation accelerates. And we're already seeing that with the launch of ChatGPT. It's really been very electrifying, right? It took 5 days for this technology to reach 1 million users. Other viral successes like Instagram or Spotify, it took them months. And there's only one travel company on this page, and it's Airbnb, and it took them years to reach 1 million users. And so I think this speaks to just how exciting this technology has been and underscores the potential for things to move very quickly and very rapidly. It does, to an extent, feel like we are experiencing, an iPhone moment, right? Or even an internet moment. And what that means is this is generalist technology. It doesn't change just one thing. It impacts everything that we do. So you can think about like when the iPhone launched, you could have said right away, that's really bad news for Motorola. That's really bad news for BlackBerry. Would you have said that that's really bad news for Thomas Cook? But ultimately, companies like that went bankrupt for not being able to move fast enough in the mobile era and the internet era, right? But when Steve Jobs is on stage introducing the iPhone, you say, oh man, Motorola is really in trouble. But you don't necessarily think like what's going to happen to Expedia or what's going to happen to Marriott or what's going to happen to Thomas Cook. And this feels like this is the moment that we have where there's a couple of really obvious baseline use cases where we're going to see real impacts. But in the long run, it becomes increasingly hard to predict what the impact of AI can be. And so we sort of broke this down a couple different ways of thinking about this, right? One is how quickly can AI impact pieces within travel? And then secondly, in the long run, how big could those impacts be? And so we kind of had, 4 or 5-ish buckets that you can think about. The first is this sort of operational bucket, sort of thinking back end. How can we use GPT or AI tools to make people more operationally efficient? The second was customer support. How do you use it in terms of chatbots and helping people? The third was around reputation and review management, an increasingly large tool. How do you use AI tools for that? And the fourth bucket, which is really 2 buckets and really a huge bucket, was about search. And you could arguably slice that into both searching for travel inspiration, which is where should I go for a beach vacation? That is a search. And it's also search in terms of the very specific travel planning, which is, you want to go to Barcelona. I want to go visit Justin in Barcelona. And I say, what's the best hotel to stay at in Barcelona, or best hotel for families under $500 in Barcelona? And so there's a lot of different moving pieces to this idea of search, what Rafat was referring to as the tyranny of the search bar. And so when we start to slice these things out, we say, what's going to be first? The very first is going to be operational efficiencies. We already know that these tools are there. For instance, GitHub has launched a tool called Copilot. It helps coders and developers write better, faster code. There are plenty of coders and developers being hired by the travel industry. We already know that that is a day one use case. There's also, by the way, a ton of, we won't get super into the weeds of this, but legal and privacy concerns as well. And if you start operationally and you start internally, you have to worry a lot less about privacy or about chatbots gone rogue or some weird answers that it gives your customers. So we think day one, the use case is operational internal. The pretty quickly one to follow will be customer support and chatbots, because ChatGPT is really a very smart chatbot already today. Companies already use chatbots today. You put those things together, peanut butter and jelly, it's going to be a good match. The third is around reputation and review, using AI tools to go out, read your TripAdvisor reviews, read your Yelp reviews, understand the sentiment and respond to them. That's also is very quickly going to happen today. And then the longer term, the bigger impacts are things around search, of how people discover destinations, discover flights, discover hotels, discover things to do using ChatGPT. And you can see that second, the bubble one, we kind of said, okay, well, what's the opportunity? Reputation is a smaller opportunity. Support, also relatively smaller. The big dollars come within those search areas, things like travel plan and travel inspiration. And how will travel impact, and how will AI impact that? And we're going to dive a little more into some of those examples. I want to throw it here to my colleague, Justin. He's very much on the ground talking to a lot of different, both big companies and startups. You can see this is just some of the companies he's interviewed. Justin, why don't you tell us a bit about where you're already seeing AI being used and what companies are telling you about AI usage today?
Yeah, so I've interviewed the chief technology officers of Booking.com, Expedia, an executive at Trip.com, which is the OTA based in Singapore. I've also spoken with a few startups, and not just me, but other reporters as well are speaking to companies. And I've played around with a lot of these different things, and it seems like the big OTAs definitely see an opportunity. They are always reminding me that it's not the only thing they're focused on. They're doing other things, and they're still using AI for their other operations. But it seems like they're all dedicating resources and people to projects around this. and we know that Expedia and Kayak are working with ChatGPT on the plugins, and Trip.com and Expedia both have put out chatbots, sort of like a travel planning and booking chatbot. And then Booking.com is specifically waiting, I think, to push out something that is a little more ready to go based on what the executive told me. I think Trip.com and Expedia, I think they wanted to get something out early, and the tools, I'll be honest, are not that useful at the moment. But I think it's about perfecting something, gathering data, and so it's just a couple of different approaches.
Yeah. And so, and I would just jump in there, Justin, right? So Expedia and Kayak in particular, Kayak is owned by Book and Holdings, have really been gung-ho or early, let's say, on these plugins. So the idea is that I don't know how in the weeds we want to get, but ChatGPT, it's trained on this huge data set. They call it a corpus sometimes, this huge data set of text and knowledge and websites and everything out there. They scrape the web, and then they stopped. They stopped in 2021. And so ChatGPT doesn't have more modern information, and that's where this plugin ecosystem is going to come in and play. And so what Expedia and Kayak have been trying to do is to feed in real-time flight, route, hotel inventory data into ChatGPT. So you combine the GPT language model with the real-time Expedia or Kayak data, and you get some really interesting things in search. Right now, it's still paywalled. It's not available to the general public, but we're already starting to see iterations where Expedia and Kayak have jumped in to say, hey, ChatGPT, I need a hotel. I'm looking for a hotel that's family friendly, under $500 in Barcelona, in downtown Barcelona, right? And being able to provide those kind of responses.
Yeah, let me add a little bit to this. Navan, whose name is on there, formerly called Trip Actions. They were really the first travel company to announce quickly that they renamed their customer service bot Ava, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And which is their customer service bot that's based on GPT engine. They've been close to the OpenAI ecosystem. They're based in Silicon Valley. They were early in it. I have talked to their executives, and they're in a corporate travel environment where the parameters are more defined, if you will, from a booking and customer service perspective. They expect quite a large percent of their customer service, a huge majority of their customer service requests to be answered by these versions of AI chatbot type experiences. So I guess these are the current in the online travel world. Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Oh no,
in terms of the startups, the startups that are there, and TripNose, Breezeway, Guide Geek, which is Matador Networks, WhatsApp-based chatbot, etc. And I'm sure there are 20 others that we haven't listed here. In terms of the startup type opportunities or companies that you're seeing there, what is there a general thesis that they're going with, or common thread? Are they in the trip inspiration type phase?
Right. Yeah, well, a couple of those in there. So specifically Trip Notes and Guide Geek, they're doing similar things as like the ChatGPT plugins, as in they're trying to help travelers plan and book. And as Seth was saying, it's about kind of pairing that software, that AI model with data and capabilities. So Trip Notes it's sort of like a mapping type of platform similar to TripAdvisor, and that's what that the original company called Welcome, it's a startup. That's basically what that was, and I think he realized that it's hard to, as a mapping startup, travel mapping, to compete with something like TripAdvisor. So he took all of the resources basically of the startup Welcome, and they're focusing all of the resources on Trip Notes, which is a similar mapping function, but they're pairing it with the generative AI planning itinerary, and I was just playing around with it again today, actually, and you can ask it something, and then it'll give you links to like maybe 5 restaurants, for example, and it'll give you links to those restaurants. You can click on it. It'll give you details of the restaurant and it put on the map. So GuideGeek is doing something, a similar planning and booking, but they're doing it within WhatsApp.
Yeah, which is interesting. They're trying to use existing messaging mechanisms versus creating their own chat.
Yeah,
It
I
is
can really
technically a chatbot, but the skin is WhatsApp.
Yeah, so
right. Yeah, I see the utility with it, and they're from what I've seen, they have a partnership with Skyscanner, and their flight information that they can share has been, from what I've seen, the most impressive, the most detailed, and the most accurate at the moment.
Interesting.
So we have this whole ecosystem of different companies, and they're each kind of playing around with different pieces of this pie, so to speak, right? Just to go back one slide. So we know that Expedia and Kayak, they're playing around with search, which is where we think the big dollars are. Navan, that's Trip Actions, they're really in on a lot of the chatbot stuff, which is, I think, also very interesting. There's a number of chatbot startups as well, too. I spoke to one founder, a company called Journey, which actually isn't on this slide, but they're in short-term rentals, and they're also doing chatbots. And they basically have a short-term rental technology. They have property management system tech that already had some existing chat features, and they're trying to make their chats smarter by basically plugging into the ChatGPT AI, and then just running slightly fine-tuning those models so that they can answer customer service questions. There is a really big, I'll just say, a really big customer service opportunity here.
Yeah, there's so much more potential than just a chatbot. I think the chatbots are a good way to show the public what this technology can do.
Yeah.
But the startup on there that I have, Dove, I specifically wanted to put that one on because they offer hotel tech, like operations software, and they're using AI to, for example, help a front desk person prioritize messages that they get based on like keywords, and also help them draft responses. So there's so much more, and I'm interested to see more of that coming out.
Where that's actually one of the LinkedIn questions as well. Would love to hear more regarding the marketing side, but operationally, examples of, as you know, in the hospitality industry, scheduling. This is also, by the way, if you look at what happened with Southwest, meltdown was very much a scheduling meltdown that happened. What was it, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, over the holidays?
December, yeah.
And can you imagine today, 6 months later, that scheduling will not be taken over by AI, with obviously the right human oversight for it, and with guidelines. But whether it's an airline scheduling, hospitality scheduling, whether hotels or restaurants, where a lot of this will come in, customer service, the back of the house communication, sentiment analysis of guests at a property, etc. All of that will be taken over, at least by versions of AI run by smart humans, if you will.
And I also think of the wait time stuff, like airline, again, not to pick on the airlines too badly, but happens to hotels, happens to online travel agencies too. The wait times are outrageous sometimes, right? And if you remember, in the depths of the pandemic, there were 4, 5, 6 hour calls, many of them for very basic tasks, canceling, rebooking, processing refunds. And so when we talk about these potential for chatbots, it's not that all customer service becomes an AI chatbot. It's that, one, we underestimate how hard it actually is to train a really good customer service rep. And two, they're expensive. And so it's better to reserve them for really tough, customer service thorny issues, and then have all of your first line, maybe even some second line stuff done by AIs or ChatGPTs. And I think we're going to see a lot of companies, and some of the companies here, kind of offer those tools as plugins, or Expedia and Navan are both working on building those in-house and first-party ways to differentiate themselves and overcome what in some cases is a fairly negative customer service reputation with the power of this technology.
Yeah, and we already blown through 25 minutes here quickly, and so let's move, and then we'll get to questions soon.
But we'll keep moving. How big is the market for AI? So this was the actual output of our report. We think the baseline is $8.5 billion, and that's adding up those core opportunities. And then when we get to dreaming big, we see another $20 billion. And so just to give you an example of how we came to this and to answer a question at the same time, I saw Jared in the chat was asking about operational efficiencies. Well, we estimate that the global travel industry spends something like over $3 billion annually on developer salaries. And so what if you could get some sort of efficiency there, like a 10% efficiency, a 20% efficiency? It translates into multi-million-dollar, 300 million plus opportunities in savings just from baseline stuff like operational efficiencies, making programmers more efficient, stuff that we know we can do today. And that's how we get to those numbers. And, I won't give away the full report, but we add those up over all these different categories that we've been speaking about to get to our numbers. But then the question is, how are these going to have big picture changes? How does AI change and challenge the industry? And there's a couple of three big challenges that I want to talk about. The first is about how it changes the distribution landscape. We've at Skift kind of used this word channel wars in the past, where there's this constant tug of war, frenemies between the distributors and the suppliers. And we kind of tried to illustrate this in the slide. There's this back and forth. On the one hand, the suppliers, which are in black, they offer the amenities. They control the product. They control the service. That's a huge advantage. On the other hand, distributors, they tend to be really good at search engine optimization, at marketing, SEO, SEM, and even just branding, marketing. They have the inventory. And so then, the tug of war goes back to that side. The suppliers strike back with loyalty programs, reinforcing people for booking directly. But going forward in a more AI world, data is going to be the huge differentiator. Training these models and making them effective relies on collecting a huge amount of data, processing it, and being able to process it and do it well. And the reality is, most suppliers will probably be subscale. Expedia sells nearly 300 million room nights a year. On top of that, millions of flights, millions of car rentals, millions of things to do. Booking Holdings does closer to 900 million room nights across their STR and hotel portfolios. Only the very, very largest hotel brands in the world are even seeing anything close to that level of transactional data. Most, even large brands, fall far short of that. And so you got to wonder how, with kind of data becoming, it's such a cliche, data the new oil, but with data becoming this new kind of fuel for this kind of arms race, how does that change the distribution landscape? The other key challenge, and we'll discuss these all, the other key challenge is just data maturity. This was an Accenture study of AI maturity by sector, and travel ranks very low. And let's be honest, how many of us know a travel company that does their stuff in Excel, or maybe even by pen and paper? How many general managers keep their logs, their ledgers offline? How many people have their data systems siloed? How many of them run on-premise software? I spoke to so many people who said just bare minimum for AI is really to be in the cloud. And so many hotel companies are still on-premise. There's just, not only is data the key fuel, the question is, how do you get the data? Are you allowed to use it? What about privacy? And what about regulatory and legal? And how are you going to handle all those things? And who owns that data? These are huge issues that will take a lot for the industry to overcome. And so ultimately, it's this kind of push and pull. Will it be bigger, larger companies that are better able to handle that? Or can it be these more agile startups? And maybe some of them have well, we're okay with breaking things attitude too. So it's hard to say. And then the final thought on challenges with AI, and then I'll pause and we'll reopen it for discussion, is what does this mean for things like over-tourism? Remember, these AI tools are ultimately only trained on the data that is already out there, already online and easily accessible. And so if the AI is trained on a best of list, on a bunch of different best of lists, all it can give you back is those best of lists itself. And so this was a real search where should I go for spring break? And the destinations it gives me are already the most popular some of the most popular spring break destinations in the world. And so how do you, so to speak, search engine optimization for ChatGPT? If you're a small destination, how do you get discovered in ChatGPT? And also, or Google Bard, by the way, in any generative AI. And also, what does it mean for this conversation of disperse in tourists as opposed to concentrate in tourists? And how does AI wind up concentrating or dispersing people? These are we don't, frankly, I don't have the answer for you on this talk. These are big questions that we're trying to think through and understand, and that we'll need to solve as an industry. If we want to get to that huge 30 billion plus potential, we're going to need to overcome some of these challenges first.
All right, thank you, Seth. That was great. One of the things we showed, but we didn't talk about, is what it does to marketing. And obviously, the lowest hanging fruit so far has been content generation. And content generation, as you know, storytelling is what travel is all around. Anywhere from the lowest to low common denominator type content to obviously the highest level of storytelling that comes in. And a lot of it, this is not just specific to travel, but travel happens to be a very storytelling / content rich marketing medium. And so a lot of the tools that are coming in are being used by marketers. I see a lot of people here that are in the DMO space, or generally in the marketing space, hotel marketing. Somebody asked a question too. So obviously a lot of this is already happening. All the, whether it's the, we used to call last year deep fakes, and others became a term. Now nobody uses the word deep fakes because they're just fakes. Like there's no deep anymore. It's all just there. And, but there's a lot happening in content generation that will continue to be the case. And we've said this many times before, the AI is the worst it will ever be today. It's only getting better from here. So let's jump to some questions. Dan Wasiluk asked a question, but the AI increase the probability that Google Maps becomes a super app. I swear I did not pay Dan to ask this question. I wrote a whole article about this on Google Maps. If conversational AI becomes a norm, and conversations with apps or services becomes a norm in a conversational AI, the different terms of generative AI, conversational AI now is being used interchangeably, even though they're not all exactly the same. But I made a case in a video and a post, I guess 2-3 weeks ago, about how Google Maps, which is already the most used app as soon as you step outside the house, or even as you're stepping out the house or planning something. And we did a story back in 2018 or 19, Dennis Shaw, our executive editor, on how Google Maps is potentially the super app of the West, just not in the way that it's used in East, if you will. And that in a conversational based interface becomes a superpower. And certainly the filtering and the matching capability that generative AI allows really makes it even more powerful than it is today. The interesting thing that I've not heard from Google, they've been talking about, obviously Bard, we all know, is substandard, a bunch of stories that came out in the last week or so on how quickly they had to launch it and how its answers and the quality of what it's outputting is not as great as other tools out there. They've talked quite a bit, but I've not heard the word Google Maps from them, which is incredible for what I do know from, I mean, Dan, you may know this better, is I think it's not a huge revenue generator in general. So maybe that's why they're not putting emphasis on it. Search is there, obviously the biggest thing that they have. But yes, long answer to your question. I'm very bullish on mapping and visualization and locations sort of being put together in this age. Okay. Will generative AI replace travel meta search engines like Kayak?
I'll take a stab at that. Yeah. Short answer, short term, no. Long term, yes. But maybe something like that, right? I mean, not to pick on Kayak specifically. Here's the thing. Today, absolutely not. People use so many different tools for their travel plan and process. And it comes down to reliability, right? I mean, some of these AIs have a reputation for lying confidently. I might use a more aggressive word too, right? They're really good at saying these things. People don't take that many trips a year. They're very expensive. It's a huge, high consideration purchase. They will use AI tools probably alongside other travel planning tools, at least to start. there's also this question of where the AI is going to get the data from. So Kayak is probably trying to defend its position of it by saying we're as much a meta search company as we are a data provider for the AIs. However, I think if we really think in the long run and we dream big and we kind of are redesigning the tyranny of the search box, so to speak, there's potentially a world, and I'm not promising this is going to happen, but it's totally feasible that there's a world where these AIs they are potentially sitting on the top of the funnel where the meta search sits. They might even sit even higher. There's potentially inspiration things where they could replace Instagram, on the top of the funnel and things like that. So this is a potentially top of the funnel tool that makes searching and even all the way through the search funnel makes searching and booking easier. And so could it be a threat to meta search in the long run? Yes. Is it a threat to meta search in the next couple of years? Probably not as big. I mean, not as big a threat as Google. And I guess the point is if Google search gets smarter, then Google's already a threat to Kayak. So lots of thoughts there. Let's keep moving on to questions though, unless anyone wants to follow
up. There's so many questions. I don't even know where to begin. Has anyone seen AI performing e-commerce yet, making the actual booking for the guest?
I think that's a small use case, Rafat. That might fall into some of the auto GPT stuff that we were talking about, where people are beginning to auto GPT effectively chains together multiple GPT tools where each one feeds into the other, gets smarter, and asks to do specific things rather than overwhelming the tool. To my extent, I'm sure someone in Silicon Valley has booked a flight fully with GPT. Is it a consumer-facing app that's live in the marketplace yet? Not to my knowledge, although I'm sure as soon as I say that, a dozen people are going to reach out and say, Seth, how could you overlook our XYZ app? So I'm sure people are working on it.
If something as dumb as Alexa, you mean the AI behind Alexa, could accidentally book something, I'm sure generative AI will be a lot better at doing some of that. Question for Justin, where you were saying chatbots might be helpful in getting consumers acclimated to conversational AI, and how can that be more dynamic? Were you saying the chatbots will help people get used to the conversational part?
I was just saying that there's a lot more to generative AI than chatbots, but I think the chatbot that ChatGPT put out was a good way to show just non-tech people the potential that what this technology can do.
Yeah, I think it's a very smart way of saying it. This is the lowest hanging fruit that captured the imagination of the world, and that has led to this boom.
What about this one on pushback? I like this one. Do you foresee any pushback from guests or travelers who are slow to adopt new technology? I think that's a kind of fun one.
I mean, yeah, I can jump in on this for a second. So, I mean, none of the tools that I've seen yet are even close to being ready. I mean, none of them are. I don't trust any of them at the moment. And right now the question is, like, if you have to double check something on Google, why not just start in Google? So we're not there yet, but I think we will be. Not yet, though.
I want to say one more point, which is that when Google came out, people had to learn how to use Google, right? You would, like your grandmother types, "Hello, Google, can you please help me find a flight to New York?" But, theoretically, that's actually how you would talk to a GPT chatbot. So in some ways,
before that, just to remind you, or humans before that.
Yeah.
Humans before Google came along.
Well, that's true. That's how you would talk to a human too, obviously, right? So people were trying to talk to Google like they would talk to a human. They had to learn a new way of doing things. There also might be less friction in a weird way. Justin makes a great point about trustworthy, but once it becomes trustworthy, in many ways, talking to these tools is a lot more like talking to a human than it is like talking with Google or doing 100 different price drop-down filters on the sidebar of Expedia or Booking.
We only have a few minutes left. Let's spitball some things. Seth, you and I talked about NDC. The whole I dropped NDC, that word. Everybody's going to go silent. Metaphorically speaking, as soon as you drop NDC in a room, everybody goes silent. But distribution NDC. This is in the airline sector. That was supposed to be a much better way of distribution in the airline sector. If NDC was supposed to be modernization of airline distribution of airfare and content around that distribution. Do you think NDC has a chance to be disruptive? I mean, is already obsolete?
All right. So NDC, new distribution capability. It's not so new anymore. And it wasn't that new even when it was new, not to be too harsh on it. But the idea was that all airline fares were published through the global distribution systems. The airlines want to be more modern retailers. They need ways to push richer content through to their B2B and corporate travel partners. NDC was going to do that. And it's taken forever. I think to an extent, Rafat, to answer your question, there was some NDC news about American Airlines. It speaks to the core problem, which is siloed data, systems that don't speak to each other, and suppliers that are reluctant to work with certain distributor partners. That, I don't think, will fly in an AI world. The reality is that we're moving to a world where data needs to move much more freely. It needs to talk more openly for a real usable AI experience. And I think those that embrace the AI will have a better experience. And so to an extent, I do think that NDC is it's not really truly being leapfrogged, right? Because AI is still a long way from being really usable as an e-commerce tool. But I think if we're thinking in the long run arc of history, the problems that slowed down NDC are indicative of the same issues that could hold back AI. But when AI tools come to market, and as suppliers and distributors integrate their data more and more, it sort of leapfrogs over this older world of fare and itinerary data or even rich content. It changes how people shop. So I'm not ready to call it obsolete just yet, but I do think that we're already taking the next steps beyond what towards a more modern retail and experience in many ways. And I don't know. It's one of the challenges too. I kind of said jokingly, like, you still can't book a Southwest Airlines flight on Google Flights. And that's not because the tech to book Southwest on Google doesn't exist. It's because Southwest doesn't want you to be able to. And so this is one of those big integration challenges, and we'll have to see how that plays out. Is the AI technology so good and such a better customer experience that it forces a lot of suppliers to play ball in terms of sharing data and itinerary and inventory freely? That's going to be a huge question.
There's so many questions. It's incredible. And we don't have all the answers. The amazing part is this is what we do for a living, which is ask you questions, the travel industry, and then try and put together answers, talking to various people, connect the dots. That is what Skift is best at. So I think we will definitely have to end here. There's so many questions. There's so many other smart people who have more knowledge than certainly us in the comments. If you want to connect with each other on LinkedIn. Sorry, Seth, you were saying.
Can I just end on one point? Yeah. One final point, just about, if you pull up the slides.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're wrapping up, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that our report is available, and for those of you that joined, there are discount codes available.
There are discount codes available, and we will continue to obviously do this. Is Skift, the last question, is Skift planning to enter the Pakistan market? It's a very random question, but not yet, but certainly India is huge for us. But well, thank you again, folks. The Global Forum that's coming up in September is going to be very much, as you can imagine, this is our flagship conference. All the big CEOs and a lot of other players are there speaking. It's September 26th to 28th in New York City. The theme is connection in an age of AI. And we deliberately use the word connection, not just human connection, but connection as in human to human connection, human to machine connection, machine to machine connection as a theme for the Global Forum. So a lot of the discussion, all the big CEOs in the travel industry, the people at the edges, the people that are disruptors in the space will be talking about that. Obviously, our short-term rental conference is coming up in a month and a half, June 7th, New York City. A lot of the short-term rental conversations, at least, will be around AI as well. And obviously our daily coverage, the weekly newsletter that Justin puts together, and our daily newsletter that all of our editorial team, our research team, everybody else puts together, will continue to cover this. All right. Thank you, folks.
We also have an AI survey, so we do want to hear from you. So if you want to give us your feedback, I see plenty of comments. Please, it's like a 1 to 2 minute survey. It's 10 questions. We're gonna write up some findings, and we'll share the findings from this survey with you if you're interested. So if you want to tell us more about AI, do so. If you want to buy the report, please do so. And I'll let Rafa, you have
Just scan the QR code. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Justin. And thank you, folks, for listening. Recording will be available very soon. Thanks, folks.